She called me crying, my own mother. She said she missed me. She said the house felt empty without me. She said the holidays would not be the same if I was not there. I believed every word, bought a plane ticket I could barely afford, took time off work I desperately needed, and flew 1,400 miles home. When I arrived, she did not open the door. I stood outside in the cold for 6 hours, and when she finally came outside, she did not hug me. She looked at me the way you look at someone who showed up at the wrong party. Then she told me to my face that she had not actually wanted me there at all. She had needed something else from me entirely. And that was the moment I understood that my entire life with this woman had been built on that same quiet, grinding transaction. She did not love me the way I had always believed. She had been using me, and the proof was already sitting in my bag. Before we go any further, I need you to sit with something. Not a like but, not a subscribe reminder, just a real question. If the one person in the world who was supposed to want you home for the holidays turned out to be the one person who had been using your loyalty as a tool your entire life, what would you do? Would you forgive it? Would you walk away? Would you need proof before you trusted your own pain? Tell me in the comments, because by the time this story is over, I think your answer might change. My name is Riley. I am 34 years old. I live in Denver, Colorado. I have a small apartment, a job I worked very hard to get, a few good friends, and a life I built almost entirely by myself. I say almost entirely because for a long time, I believed my mother was part of that foundation. I believed she loved me the way mothers are supposed to love their daughters. I believed the calls, the birthday cards, the occasional text asking how I was doing. I believed all of it because I wanted to, because the alternative was too painful to consider. I grew up in a small town in Ohio called Millhaven. If you have never heard of it, that is fine, because most people who grew up there spent their whole adult lives trying to forget it. My mother's name is Diane. My father left when I was 7. He did not disappear completely. He moved to another state, started a new family, sent cards on holidays for a while, and then slowly, gradually stopped. By the time I was 12, he was a photograph on a shelf and a name I mentioned only when someone asked about him. So it was just Diane and me, and I told myself that was enough. I told myself she was doing her best. Diane is not a loud, dramatic villain. She is something harder to describe. She is warm on the surface. She smiles easily. She makes good coffee. She knows how to make you feel for about 20 minutes like you are the most important person in the room. And then the conversation shifts just a little, and you realize you have spent the last 20 minutes being softened up for something she wants. A favor, a validation, a piece of information she can use somewhere else. She does it so smoothly that for most of my childhood, I did not even notice it was happening. I just kept giving her what she needed, because she was my mother and I loved her, and that is what daughters do. I moved to Denver 8 years ago. I was 26, I had a job offer I could not pass up, and I was ready to stop being the small, anxious version of myself that Millhaven seemed to produce in me. My mother cried when I told her. Long, theatrical tears that made me feel like I was abandoning her. I almost stayed. I had my hand on the phone to call the recruiter and tell him I had changed my mind. And then something stopped me. A little voice somewhere quiet inside me said, "Go." So I went. The distance helped me see things more clearly. When I was not inside Diane's orbit every single day, I noticed the patterns. I noticed that she only called when she needed something. I noticed that our phone calls always circled back to what I could do for her, who I could talk to on her behalf, what information I could provide about family members she was in conflict with, what money I could send when things got tight. I noticed that when I tried to talk about my own life, she would listen for about 60 seconds and then redirect. I noticed that she never asked about my friends by name. She never remembered details I had shared. She remembered facts about me that were useful to her and forgot everything else. But I kept calling. I kept sending money when she asked. I kept making the trip home every couple of years because she was my mother. Because some part of me was still 7 years old, watching my father drive away and terrified of losing the only parent who stayed. Last November, she called me on a Tuesday evening. I remember because I had just gotten home from a long day and I was standing in my kitchen eating soup straight from the pot because I was too tired to pour it into a bowl. She was crying before I even said hello. Not quiet crying. The kind of crying that fills a phone call and makes you put down whatever you are doing and give her your full attention. She said she missed me so much. She said the house felt wrong without me. She said the holidays were coming and she could not bear the thought of spending them alone. She said, "Please, Riley, please come home. I need you here." I want to be honest with you about what I felt in that moment. I felt the pull. I felt the old familiar warmth of being needed by her. And underneath that, I felt the exhaustion of a person who has been saying yes for 34 years. But the crying was real, or it sounded real. And I could not be the daughter who stayed away when her mother was crying on the phone, so I said yes. I said I would come home for Christmas. I said I would book a ticket that week. The ticket cost $412. I could afford it, but it was not nothing. I also had to trade a shift at work, which meant losing another $200. I did not tell Diane any of this. I just booked the flight, packed my bag, arranged for my neighbor to check on my cat, and told myself this was the right thing to do. That maybe this would be different. That maybe the distance and the years had changed something between us, and this trip would be the beginning of a real relationship. I landed in Ohio on December 22nd. Diane had said she would be there to pick me up from the airport. I waited at the arrivals curb for 45 minutes. She was not there. I called. She did not answer. I texted. No reply. I finally called my cousin Becca, who lives 20 minutes from Millhaven, and Becca said she had not heard from Diane either. I got a rideshare. It cost $67. I told myself she had just forgotten the time. I told myself it was fine. When I pulled up to the house, there were cars in the driveway, several of them. Cars I did not recognize. The lights were on inside. I could hear music and voices from the street. I knocked on the door. Nobody answered. I knocked harder. Still nothing. I tried the door handle. Locked. I went around to the back door. Also locked. I called Diane again. Voicemail. I texted. No reply. I stood on the back porch in 28-degree Ohio December cold, and I told myself this was some kind of misunderstanding. I waited. I am telling you this not to make you feel sorry for me, but because I need you to understand the specific kind of humiliation that comes with standing outside your childhood home while a party goes on inside and nobody comes to the door. I sat on the back porch step for a while, then I walked around to the front and sat on the front porch. I could see shadows moving past the windows. I could hear laughter. I sent Diane 7 text messages. None of them were angry. They were patient. They were the texts of a person who still believed there was a reasonable explanation. I said things like, "Mom, I'm outside. Mom, the door is locked. Mom, it's really cold. Please call me when you get this." 6 hours? I know it sounds impossible. It sounds like something a person would only tolerate if they had lost their mind. But I had no car. It was late at night. Becca lived 20 minutes away, and I did not want to call her and explain what was happening because I was ashamed. I was ashamed that I was sitting outside my own mother's house in the cold because she would not answer the door. I was ashamed that this was happening and that I had not seen it coming, so I sat there. I put my coat over my bag, and I sat there and I waited, and I told myself she would come. She did come, eventually, at almost midnight. The front door opened, and she stepped onto the porch with a glass of wine in her hand and a look on her face that I can only describe as mild annoyance. Not guilt, not distress, not the expression of a woman who had just realized she had left her daughter standing outside for 6 hours. Annoyance, like I was a small inconvenience that had interrupted her evening. She said, "Riley, I forgot you were coming tonight." I looked at her. I said, "Mom, you picked the date. You told me December 22nd. You told me to be here by 8. She said, "Well, things got busy. I have people here." I said, "I know, I could hear them. I have been outside for 6 hours. And then she said the thing that changed everything. She said it quietly, almost like she was explaining something obvious to someone slow. She said, "Riley, I did not actually need you here for Christmas. I needed you to sign some papers for the house. I thought if I told you it was for the holidays, you would come faster. You know how you are about these things." The cold I had been sitting in for 6 hours was nothing compared to what I felt in that moment. It was the cold of a very specific kind of clarity. The kind that arrives when you realize you have been wrong about something for a very long time. I need to back up slightly. Cause the papers matter. They matter a lot, and you need to understand them to understand everything that came next. My grandmother, my mother's mother, had passed away 18 months earlier. Her name was Alina, and she was the kind of woman who made you feel safe just by being in the same room. She left behind a small house in Millhaven, a savings account with roughly $40,000, and a will that she had updated 6 months before she died. In that updated will, she divided her estate equally between her 3 children, my mother Diane, my uncle Robert, and my aunt Carol. She also left a personal gift directly to me. $10,000, separate from the 3-way split, held in a separate account in my name that required my signature and a visit to the estate attorney to release. I had not collected that money yet. I had been busy. The attorney had contacted me, and I had said I would handle it when I had time to travel. I had mentioned this to Diane in passing several months earlier, not thinking anything of it. I understood now, standing on that porch in the cold, what the papers were. They were not documents that required my signature to release my own inheritance. That required only me and the attorney. The papers Diane wanted me to sign were something else, and I was not going to sign them without reading every word. I walked into the house. There were 11 people inside, most of whom I recognized as Diane's friends and neighbors, along with 2 people I had never seen before who turned out to be Diane's boyfriend Marcus and his adult son. There was a fully decorated table, food, music, and the kind of warm holiday atmosphere that would have been lovely if I had been invited to it rather than locked out of it. Nobody seemed surprised to see me, which told me that some of them, at least, had known I was outside. Nobody said anything about it. They just nodded and went back to their conversations. I went to the bedroom that used to be mine, which was now a storage room with a futon pushed against the wall. I sat down on the futon with my coat still on, and I called Becca. Becca is Diane's niece on the other side of the family, technically my second cousin, but she has always been the closest thing I had to a sibling. She answered on the second ring. I told her what had happened, trying to keep my voice steady, and she was quiet for a long moment. Then Becca said, "Riley, she told people you were coming to help with the house stuff." That is literally what she told everyone. She said you were coming to sign over your share. I said, "My share of what? I do not have a share of the house. The house is Diane's, Robert's, and Carol's." Becca went quiet again. Then she said, "Riley, you might want to talk to the attorney before you sign anything. I have heard some things. I do not want to say the wrong thing, but do not sign anything without talking to him first." The next morning, I called the estate attorney's office the moment they opened. His name was Mr. Fenn, and he had been handling my grandmother Alina's estate since before she died. He was calm, professional, and when I explained what was happening, he asked me to come in that day. I borrowed Becca's car and drove to his office. Diane did not know I had left the house. She was still asleep when I slipped out, and I left no note. What Mr. Fenn told me over the next 90 minutes rearranged everything I thought I knew. First, he confirmed my inheritance. $10,000 in an account in my name, available whenever I signed the release. That part was straightforward. Second, he told me about the house. The house had been appraised at $280,000. Under Alina's will, it was to be sold, and the proceeds split 3 ways between Diane, Robert, and Carol. Robert and Carol had already agreed to sell. Diane had been stalling for 8 months. Third, and here is where it got complicated, Mr. Fenn showed me a document that had been filed 3 months earlier. Diane had submitted a claim to the probate court, arguing that she was the primary caregiver for Alina in her final years, and that she deserved a larger share of the estate. Specifically, she was arguing that she deserved 60% of the house sale proceeds, leaving 30% for Robert and 10% for Carol. The claim was being disputed by Robert and Carol. It was currently in a holding pattern waiting for documentation. Fourth, Mr. Fenn told me what the papers were that Diane had wanted me to sign. They were a supporting affidavit, a document in which I would swear, under penalty of perjury, that I had personally witnessed Diane providing primary care for Alina in her final months, that I had seen her there regularly, that I could testify to her dedication and sacrifice. I had not witnessed any such thing. I had visited Alina twice in her final 2 years, both times on my own, and both times Diane had not been present. I had spoken to Anna on the phone regularly, and Alina had never mentioned Diane providing care. In fact, Alina had mentioned a hired caregiver named Dolers, and she had mentioned Robert stopping by on weekends, and she had mentioned Carol driving her to appointments. She had mentioned Diane occasionally, and not always warmly. I sat across from Mr. Fenn for a long moment after he finished explaining. Then I said, She wanted me to fly here in December with a plane ticket I paid for to sign a false sworn statement so she could take money from her own brother and sister. He looked at me steadily and said nothing. He did not have to. I asked him what would happen if I signed it. He said the claim would likely be strengthened. I asked him what would happen if someone submitted a contradicting statement. He said the claim would likely fail. I asked him if he had any other information he could share. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, carefully, that during the estate process, he had documented several conversations with a liener that might be relevant if any party chose to contest the caregiving claim. I thanked him. I signed the release for my own $10,000. And then I drove back to Becca's and I sat at her kitchen table and I let myself feel everything I had been holding back since the night before. Becca made tea. She did not push me to talk. She just sat across from me and let me be a person falling apart at her kitchen table, which is, I think, one of the purest forms of love there is. After a while I said, "Did you know what the papers were?" Becca said, "I knew they were about the estate. I had heard she was trying to get a bigger cut and that she needed witnesses. I just did not know she was going to use you." I said she did not even let me inside. She left me outside for 6 hours. Becca said, "I know. And that tells you everything you need to know about how much your being there actually mattered to her." That sentence landed somewhere deep, because she was right. If Diane had truly wanted me there, she would have opened the door. The fact that she left me outside for 6 hours while a party happened around her meant that my presence, my actual physical human presence, was never the point. The signature was the point. I was a means to an end, and once she had gotten uncomfortable or distracted or decided she did not need me that night after all, I simply ceased to matter. I stayed at Becca's that night. I did not go back to Diane's house. I did not call her. I turned off read receipts and I lay in Becca's guest bed staring at the ceiling, and I thought about every time in my life I had given Diane something she asked for. Every time I had sent money. Every favor. Every phone call I had dropped what I was doing to take. Every time I had told myself she was doing the best she could and that I should be patient and that she loved me in her own way. I thought about the plane ticket I could not fully afford, the shift I had traded, the $67 rideshare from the airport, the 6 hours in 28-degree cold, and I thought about the document she had wanted me to sign. A false, sworn statement. She had not just wanted my time and money this time. She had wanted my integrity. She had wanted to use my name and my supposed word to commit what was, in legal terms, perjury. The next morning, I called Robert. Robert is my mother's older brother. I had always kept a careful distance from the conflict between him and Diane because I did not want to be drawn into family politics. Robert had always been kind to me. He had sent birthday cards without fail. He had come to my high school graduation when Diane had forgot to tell him it was happening. He was a decent man who had simply chosen not to play Diane's games, which meant their relationship had been cold for years. He answered on the first ring. He sounded surprised to hear from me. I told him I was in Ohio. I told him I had met with Mr. Fenn. I told him why I had come, what Diane had wanted me to sign, and what I had told Mr. Fenn instead. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Riley, I am so sorry. I did not know she was going to involve you." I said, "I know. I did not call to place blame. I called because I want to tell you what I actually saw during a liener's last year's. If it helps your case, it helps your case. I am not going to lie in a sworn statement for anyone, but I am also not going to stay silent if the truth is useful." Robert said, "Are you willing to provide a statement?" I said I was. I said I would speak with Mr. Fenn again and ask about the process. Robert said he would contact his own attorney that day. When I hung up, I felt something shift inside me. Not triumph, not anger, something quieter. The feeling of a person who has stopped waiting for someone else to validate their pain and has simply decided to tell the truth. Diane called me at 11 that morning. I did not answer. She called again at 11:30. Then. At noon. Then she sent a text that said, "Riley, where are you? Come back to the house. We need to talk about the papers." I read that text twice. Not a question about how I was doing, not an apology for the night before, not a single word acknowledging that she had left me standing outside in the cold for 6 hours. Just, "Come back, we need to talk about the papers." I did not reply. I spent Christmas Eve at Becca's house. Becca's husband made chili. Her 2 kids, who are 9 and 11, asked me to play a card game after dinner, and I said yes, and I sat at their kitchen table playing Uno for 2 hours, and I felt, in the middle of all of this mess, something that almost resembled peace. Diane sent 3 more texts that evening. The first one said she was worried about me. The second one said she hoped I understood that everything she did was for the family. The third one said, and I am going to quote this exactly because I saved it, "Riley, I know you are upset, but you need to understand that this money is not just about me. It is about protecting what our family built. Alina would have wanted me to have it. You know that. Stop being selfish and call me." Stop being selfish. I had flown 1,400 miles on a ticket I could not fully afford, sat in 28-degree cold for 6 hours, and she was calling me selfish for not signing a false sworn statement on her behalf. I saved every one of those texts, every single one, not because I was planning something dramatic, but because I had learned, somewhere in the past 24 hours, that documentation matters. That proof matters. That when someone tries to rewrite the story later, you want to have the original version somewhere safe. On Christmas morning, something unexpected happened. Diane showed up at Becca's house. Becca answered the door. I heard them from the guest room, Becca's voice careful, and even Diane's voice rising in that particular way she has when she feels cornered. Then Becca came and knocked on my door and said, "She is outside. You do not have to come out." I thought about it for a moment. Then I said, "No, I will come out." I want to be clear about something. I did not go out there to fight. I did not go out there to cry or beg or get the apology I deserved. I had spent the last 34 years hoping for something from this woman that she was not capable of giving. I was done hoping. I went out there because I was not afraid of her anymore, and I wanted her to feel that. She was standing on Becca's porch. She was dressed nicely, hair done, the version of Diane that the world sees. She looked at me with an expression I had seen her use 100 times. It was the expression of a woman who believes she is the reasonable one, the patient one, the misunderstood one. She said, "Riley, I am sorry about the other night. Things got confused." I said, "You left me outside for 6 hours." She said, "I know, and that was not how I planned it. I just got caught up with the guests and I lost track of time." I said, "You told me you needed me for the holidays. You told me you missed me. You cried on the phone. But what you actually needed was a signature on a document that would have required me to lie under oath." She blinked, a small, quick blink. The tell she does not know she has, the one that appears when she has been caught but is already calculating her next move. She said it was not lying. "You saw me care for Alina." I said, "I saw you visit Alina twice in 2 years. I saw Alina on my own visits, and Alina told me about Dollars, her hired caregiver, and about Robert, and about Carol. She did not describe you as her primary caregiver, and I am not going to swear to something I did not witness." Diane's face changed. The reasonable expression collapsed a little, and something harder appeared underneath it. She said, "You already talked to the attorney. You went behind my back." I said I went to collect my inheritance, the one Alina left for me, which I had every right to do. She said, "You talked to Robert." I did not deny it. I said, "Mom, I flew here because I thought you needed me. I spent money I did not have. I sat outside your house for 6 hours. And the reason you wanted me here was to sign a false document so you could take a larger share of Alina's estate from your own brother and sister. That is what happened. I am not confused about it. I am not being dramatic. That is what happened." She said, "I cannot believe you are doing this to me. At Christmas." That sentence, "I cannot believe you are doing this to me. At Christmas." As if she had not done something to me. As if the entire shape of the conversation was simply that she was a victim and I was the one causing damage. I said, "I am going home tomorrow. I think we need some time apart after this." She said, "If you leave now, Riley, do not expect me to come crawling. I will not apologize for trying to protect our family's interests." I said, "I know you will not. That is actually why I am leaving." She stood there for a moment, and I think she expected me to break, to soften, to do what I had always done, which was find a way to make her comfortable again, to smooth the tension, to tell her I understood even when I did not, to stay even when I should have gone. But I did not break. I just stood there looking at her. And after a moment, she turned and walked back to her car. I watched her go, and I felt, underneath all the grief and the exhaustion and the cold residue of 6 hours on a porch, something that I can only describe as relief. The specific relief of someone who has put down something very heavy and finally let themselves feel how much it weighed. I flew home on December 26th. My own $10,000 was in my account by December 28th. I sent Becca a very nice gift basket. I called Robert and gave him a detailed written account of my visits to Alina and what she had said during our phone calls. He forwarded it to his attorney. In January, Diane sent me a long email. It was 4 paragraphs of carefully constructed grievance. She said I had betrayed her. She said I had chosen Robert over my own mother. She said she had sacrificed everything for me over the years and that I had stabbed her in the back when she needed me most. She said she hoped I was proud of myself. I read that email 3 times. I did not reply right away. I sat with it for 2 days. I let myself feel the old familiar pull of it, the little hook in the language designed to activate my guilt. And then I replied. 3 sentences. I said, I did not betray you. I simply refused to lie for you. I wish you well. She did not respond for 6 weeks. Then in March, I got a phone call from Carol, my aunt, who said that Diane's caregiving claim had been denied by the probate court. The estate would be divided as Alina had originally intended, 3 equal shares. Diane received approximately $93,000, which was her 1/3 share of the house sale, in addition to other smaller assets. Carol said, I know this has been hard on you. Your grandmother loved you very much. She talked about you all the time. I cried on that phone call, not because of the money or the court outcome. I cried because of the image of Alina sitting in her chair, talking about me to Carol, loving me in the simple and uncomplicated way that some people are capable of. I cried because I missed her. I cried because she had known, somehow, to put that $10,000 directly in my name where Diane could not reach it. And I wondered if she had known, on some level, what might happen. In April, Diane called me. I did not answer. She left a voicemail. She said she was sorry. She said she had been under a lot of stress. She said she missed me and she hoped we could talk. She said the holidays had not gone the way she intended. She said she loved me. I saved the voicemail. I listened to it several times, and I noticed what was in it and what was not. What was in it? The word sorry, the word stress, the word missed, the word love. What was not in it? Any acknowledgement of the specific things she had done. Any recognition that she had used a fabricated holiday invitation to get me on a plane so I could sign a false legal document. Any statement that what she had done was wrong and not just inconvenient. Sorry without acknowledgement is not an apology. It is a reset button. It is a way of returning to zero so the same patterns can begin again. I had accepted that reset button my entire life. I was not going to accept it this time. I called her back 2 days later. I kept it short. I said, I heard your voicemail. I appreciate that you reached out. I am not ready to talk regularly right now. I need more time. If you want to have a real conversation about what happened, I am open to that eventually. But I need you to actually understand what happened, not just want things to go back to normal. She said, I do understand what happened, Riley. I made a mistake. Can you not find it in your heart to forgive me? I said, forgiveness is something I am working on. It is separate from trust. I can work toward forgiving you and still not be in regular contact with you. Those are not the same thing. She did not have a response for that. We said goodbye. I hung up. I sat with my phone in my hands for a moment, and then I put it down and went to make dinner. Over the following months, something interesting happened. Without Diane's voice in my ear on a regular basis, I had space. Space to hear my own thoughts more clearly. Space to notice how much energy I had been spending managing her feelings, her expectations, her crises. Space to recognize how small and careful I had been making myself for 34 years because big, confident Riley was too much for her, and if I became too much, she might withdraw the conditional version of love she had been offering. I started therapy. My therapist, whose name I will not share because she serves her privacy, said something in our 3rd session that I have thought about almost every day since. She said, children of emotionally unavailable parents often mistake management for love. You spent your life managing your mother's emotions, and because that management was so constant and so consuming, it felt like love. It felt like closeness. But closeness does not require you to constantly shrink. I cried for a long time after that session. The kind of crying that feels like something draining out of you rather than something overflowing. By summer, I had made some decisions. I was keeping my distance from Diane, not with anger, but with intention. I was allowing myself to invest in the relationships that had always been genuine. Becca, a few close friends in Denver, Robert and Carol, who had both reached out with warmth since the estate settled. I was spending my inherited money on things I had been putting off. A new mattress, some dental work I had delayed for 2 years, a solo trip to New Mexico that I took in July, and that was, without exaggeration, one of the most restorative weeks of my life. In August, Diane sent a birthday card. My birthday is August 14th. The card had a generic message printed inside, and she had signed it "Love, Mom." There was a check for $50, which was more than she had given me in years and which made me feel oddly sad, not grateful. Sad, because it felt like a payment. Like she was keeping an account somewhere, and this was a deposit designed to reopen negotiations. I thanked her in a short text. I did not cash the check for 3 weeks. Then I cashed it and donated the $50 to a local food bank. It felt right. In October, something happened that I had not expected. Marcus, Diane's boyfriend, the man who had been at that Christmas party, reached out to me through Facebook. His message was polite and careful. He said he had been there that night and that he had felt uncomfortable about what happened. He said he had told Diane afterward that what she had done was wrong and that she had not taken it well. He said he thought I deserved to know that not everyone in that room had been comfortable with the situation. I thanked him. It was a small thing, but it mattered in a particular way that I did not fully expect. It mattered because it confirmed something I had been quietly questioning. Was I overreacting? Was I being too hard on her? Was I reading too much into one bad night? Marcus's message said, no, what happened was visible enough that even her boyfriend had felt uncomfortable. I was not overreacting. I was not being dramatic. I was responding appropriately to something genuinely wrong. By November, almost exactly a year after that phone call where she cried and asked me to come home, Diane called again. I answered this time. She sounded different, quieter, less theatrical. She said she had been thinking about the past year. She said she had done some things she was not proud of. She said she wanted to see me at Christmas. I felt the pull again, that old reflex, the child who wants her mother to mean it this time, but I also felt something new underneath it, a steadiness, a clarity that had not been there a year ago. I said, Mom, I appreciate you calling. I am not going to come to Millhaven for Christmas this year, but I would be open to talking more regularly if we can do it honestly. No pressure about the estate, no requests that put me in a difficult position, just 2 people trying to have a real relationship. She said, that is all I want. I said, then that is where we start. We have been talking about once a month since then. It is careful, cautious, nothing like the relationship I spent 34 years wishing we had, but it is honest. She has not asked me for money or favors. She has asked a few times about my life. She remembered the name of a friend I mentioned. Small things, but real things. I do not know where it goes from here. I am not optimistic in the naive way I used to be. I am something more like curious. I am watching carefully. I am keeping records, not because I am waiting to catch her, but because I have learned that documentation is not paranoia. It is just wisdom. My grandmother Alina left me $10,000. What she actually left me was something much more valuable. She left it in a separate account that required my signature because she knew, at the end of her life, that I should have something that was purely mine. Something that could not be redirected or borrowed or claimed. Something that said, this is for Riley. Not for the family, not for anyone else, just for Riley. I think about that a lot. I think about Alina sitting in her chair, choosing her words carefully with Mr. Fenn, making sure there was something in that will that was just for me. She could not tell me, while she was alive, everything she saw. But she left me the message she could. This is the thing about betrayal that people do not always talk about. The betrayal itself is painful. But it is also, if you can survive the pain and not drown in the bitterness, a kind of gift. It shows you exactly what was real and what was not. It clears the air. It gives you the painful permission to stop pouring your energy into a container that was never going to hold it. I used to give Diane everything she asked for because I was afraid of what losing her would feel like. Now I know what it feels like, I did not lose her. I found the edge of what I am willing to give. And standing at that edge, holding my boundary, turning toward the people who have always shown up for me, that is not loss. That is freedom. I am 34 years old. I have a small apartment in Denver, a job I worked hard to get, a few good friends, and a relationship with my mother that is finally, for the first time in my life, honest. It is not warm, it is not what I dreamed of, but it is real. And real, even when it is hard, is worth more than any beautiful lie. If you are sitting somewhere right now, reading this or listening to it, and you recognize this pattern, the endless giving, the excuses you make for someone's behavior, the way you have been shrinking yourself to fit into their life without them ever asking what you need, I want you to hear this from someone who lived it. You are not wrong about what you feel. You are not overreacting. You are not too sensitive. You have simply been loving someone at a level they were never loving you back. And you deserve to put that energy somewhere it will grow. It will not be easy. The moment you stop being endlessly available is the moment they will tell you that you are selfish, that you have changed, that you are doing this to them. Let them say it, because the truth is simpler than their story. The truth is that you finally started treating yourself the way you always deserved to be treated, and that scared them because it meant the arrangement was over. Eleanor knew, Becca knew, Robert knew. Mr. Fenn, in his careful attorney way, knew, and eventually I knew too. I just needed 6 hours on a porch in December to finally believe it. If this story reached something inside you, I want you to take a moment before you scroll away. Not to like the video, not because the algorithm needs it, but because something real just happened here and it deserves a second. If you have ever been used by someone who called it love, if you have ever sat outside somewhere cold and convinced yourself there was a reasonable explanation, if you have ever signed or almost signed or been pressured to sign something you knew was wrong because someone needed you to, you are not alone. Tell me your version of this in the comments. I read every one. And if this is someone else's story that you needed to hear today, share it with them. Some people need permission to know that what they feel is real. Maybe this is that permission.